No one remembered what started the argument: a spilled drink, a careless insult, something small. But when Sergeant Cole slapped the quiet woman from logistics, the sound echoed across the mess hall. The room froze, and within an hour, the entire base would realize he hadn't just hit a woman. He'd struck her. By sunrise, 3 generals had arrived by helicopter, not for discipline, but for retribution. And by the time they were done, every man who laughed that night would wish they hadn't. The desert base was quiet that night, the kind of stillness that came only after weeks of tension. Dust drifted through the mess hall vents, settling on trays, boots, and half-eaten rations. A low hum of conversation filled the air, tired laughter echoing off metal walls. Then the door opened, and she walked in. Sergeant Maya Rains, or as the roster listed her, Savannah Logistics Consultant. She wore plain fatigues, sleeves rolled, hair tied back. No rank insignia, no medals, no attitude. Just that calm, unreadable look she always carried. Most soldiers ignored her. Some didn't. "Hey, Doc Boxes," Private Keller called out, grinning from the corner table. "You bring us more of that expired rations magic, or are we starving again tonight?" Laughter rippled. Maya didn't respond. She placed a clipboard on the counter, checking inventory sheets. Her silence only made them bolder. Cole, Sergeant First Class, broad shoulders, loud mouth, leaned back in his chair. "You know, I've seen her type before," he muttered to the group. "Desk job. No field time. Probably here 'cause somebody up top wanted to feel inclusive." "Careful," another soldier said under his breath. "She's on General North's personal transfer list." Cole snorted. "Means nothing. I've been on list too, for discipline." The table erupted in laughter again. Maya finished her paperwork, still calm. But when she turned to leave, Cole stood, blocking her path. "Hold up, sweetheart," he said, grinning. "At least say thank you for the hospitality." Her eyes met his, cold, steady. "Step aside." "Oh ho," he mocked. "We got a tough one." The others watched, some smirking, some uneasy. No one intervened. Not yet. Cole took a step closer, the smell of sweat and cheap whiskey hanging between them. "I asked you something, ma'am." Her expression didn't change. "And I told you to move. That's when it happened. A sharp crack. Fast. Brutal." The slap echoed off the metal walls. The room fell silent. Maya didn't stagger. Didn't even blink. She just stared at him, the red print on her cheek the only sign anything had happened. Every man in the mess hall froze, halfway between disbelief and fear. Then, slowly, Maya exhaled. "You shouldn't have done that." Her tone wasn't angry. It was almost disappointed. Cole smirked, though his voice faltered. "Oh yeah? Or what?" She didn't answer. She simply picked up her clipboard, brushed a fleck of dust from her sleeve, and walked out. No shouting. No threats. Just that quiet, controlled walk, straight out the door and into the night. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Private Keller whispered, "Dude." "You really just hit her?" Cole shrugged, forcing a laugh. "Relax, she's just a civilian. Probably gonna write a report. Cry to command." But his voice lacked conviction, because something in the air had changed. Outside, the wind picked up, a low howl sweeping through the tents. The base lights flickered once, then steadied, and somewhere near the command tower, a single word was spoken over the radio, quietly, deliberately. "Send word to the generals, now." By morning, the desert would be roaring with rotor blades, and Sergeant Cole would realize that what he'd done wasn't just a mistake, it was an incident. A single slap that would bring 3 generals out of retirement, and make every man on that base wish they'd stopped him. The sun rose hard and unforgiving, turning the base into a glare of steel and sand. Usually by dawn, the sound of drills filled the air, boots striking dirt, orders echoing across the yard. But that morning no one shouted, no one joked, no one even touched their breakfast. The slap had spread through the base like wildfire. No one saw Maya again after she left the mess hall. Her quarters were empty, her bunk untouched. Some said she'd gone to command. Others said she'd driven off toward the northern outpost. But no one really knew, and that uncertainty made everyone restless. By mid-morning, even Cole's bravado had faded. He sat alone at the corner table, his usual entourage scattered. Every time a jeep passed by outside, he flinched. Private Keller slid into the seat across from him. "You think she's filing charges?" Cole forced a grin. "Against me, please. They'll probably just transfer her. This base has seen worse." But Keller didn't look convinced. "You don't get it. She wasn't a random contractor. Her file's classified." Cole frowned. "How the hell do you know that?" Quartermaster told me. "Tried to update her records last week. System blocked him. Full lockout. Priority clearance. That's not normal, man." Cole looked away, jaw tight. "So what? Maybe she's some intel officer on rehab duty." "Doesn't change anything." Keller hesitated, then leaned in. "I heard she was attached to something called Project Seraph before this." "Ring a bell?" Cole didn't answer. Because it did. Project Seraph was a ghost story, whispered among enlisted men. A classified unit that operated off-record, taking impossible missions under direct orders from high command. Most believed it was just a rumor. But if she had ties to that, Cole's stomach turned cold. Before he could respond, a distant rumble rolled through the desert, low and rhythmic, the sound of helicopters. Dozens of heads turned. Within minutes, the entire base was outside, shielding their eyes as 3 massive choppers descended. Black, unmarked, their rotors slicing through the haze. Dust exploded across the tarmac. Command officers rushed to form ranks, but the formation fell apart when the first figure stepped out. General Marcus Hale, silver hair, dark glasses, medals like scars across his chest, a legend in the Corps, last seen commanding an entire war zone 3 years ago. Behind him came General Shaw and General Ortega, both decorated veterans, both long retired. The crowd murmured in disbelief. 3 generals on one base? That didn't happen. Not unless the world was ending. Cole's mouth went dry. "No way." The base commander, Colonel Reddick, sprinted to meet them, saluting sharply. "Generals, we weren't expecting—" "Clearly," Hale cut him off, voice gravel and steel. "Where is she?" Reddick blinked. "Sir, who exactly?" Hale's expression didn't change. "Maya Raines." The name hit like a gunshot. Dozens of soldiers glanced at each other. Cole froze. Reddick hesitated. "We've had an incident, sir. I was preparing a report." "You won't need one," Hale interrupted. "We already know." Within 20 minutes, the base was locked down. Radios scrambled. Gates sealed. Every officer above rank of lieutenant was summoned to briefing. No one outside the command tent knew what was being said, but the faces that came out afterward were pale. One rumor spread faster than the wind. The generals weren't here for an investigation. They were here for revenge. That night, long after curfew, Cole sat on his bunk, listening to the faint thrum of generators and the distant whine of drones. The lights flickered once, then twice. And from somewhere outside, he heard the unmistakable click of boots on concrete. Slow, deliberate, coming closer to the barracks. He stood, heart pounding. When the door opened, a silhouette filled the frame. Maya Raines, calm, unharmed, eyes cold as the desert night. And behind her, the 3 generals. The air inside the barracks felt heavy, thick with the kind of silence that made men forget to breathe. Maya Raines stood in the doorway, framed by the floodlights from the yard. The faint hum of helicopter blades still echoed across the base, but it was her presence that froze every man in place. Cole took a step back. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Behind her, the 3 generals entered. Hale, Shaw, and Ortega. The room snapped to attention on instinct, boots thudding against the concrete. No one dared to speak. General Hale's gaze swept over the soldiers, hard as iron. "At ease," he said, though his tone left no room for ease of any kind. He turned toward Maya. "Permission to proceed, Captain?" Every head jerked up. "Captain?" Cole blinked, confused. "Wait, what?" But Maya didn't respond. She gave Hale a short nod, calm and precise. The kind of salute that came from muscle memory, not habit. The general stepped aside, and for the first time, Maya addressed the room. "I didn't come here for rank," she said quietly. "Or power. I came to serve, to rebuild something that war broke." Her voice was steady, controlled, but each word carried weight. "I didn't want anyone to know who I was. Not after what happened on Falcon Ridge." At that name, General Shaw looked down, his jaw tightening. Ortega crossed his arms, eyes clouded. A few soldiers shifted uneasily. They'd heard the name before. Falcon Ridge, a Black Ops disaster buried in military archives. Entire platoons lost. Classified for a decade. Hale broke the silence. "She's not just logistics. She's Captain Maya Raines, Tactical Commander, Project Seraph." Gasps rippled through the room. Cole's knees went weak. Hale continued, voice sharp. "When insurgents took control of Ridge, she was the one who went back. Alone. She called in coordinates, directed air support, and pulled 73 men out under fire. 3 of those men were us," he motioned toward the other generals. "We owe her our lives." Cole's face went pale. Maya's expression didn't soften. "That was a long time ago, sir. I'm not that person anymore." Shaw shook his head. "You can walk away from the uniform, Captain, but not from what you are." Cole finally found his voice, weak, trembling. "I didn't know." Hale's gaze pinned him in place. "You didn't care to know." He stepped closer, boots echoing against the floor. "You hit a decorated officer, a hero who saved more men than you'll ever command, and you did it in front of witnesses and like a coward." Cole swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't," Hale snapped. "You'll speak when she tells you to." All eyes turned to Maya. She didn't move for a long time, just studied him, the man who thought she was beneath him. "Finally," she said quietly, "I'm not here for revenge." Cole exhaled shakily, a flicker of relief crossing his face, until she added, "I'm here to teach this base what respect actually means." Hale turned toward Colonel Reddick, who'd been standing frozen near the door. "From this moment, Captain Raines is reinstated to full authority. Anyone who disrespects her, or fails to follow her orders, answers directly to me." "Yes, sir," Reddick said quickly, saluting. Maya looked at the assembled soldiers. "I don't need apologies," she said. "I need discipline. You'll learn it the hard way, starting at dawn." And then, without another word, she walked out, leaving nothing but the echo of her boots and a room full of men realizing they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Outside, the desert wind kicked up again, whispering through the tents. Keller turned to Cole, voice barely a whisper. "Man, who is she really?" Cole stared after her, the blood drained from his face. "Someone we should have never touched," he muttered. "Because now, she's in command." The next morning, before the first light touched the desert, the loudspeakers crackled to life. "All personnel, report to the training yard, full gear, 0 exceptions." The voice was calm, female, unmistakably Captain Maya Raines. By the time the sun broke over the dunes, every man on the base was lined up in formation, boots digging into the cold sand. The generals stood at the edge of the yard like silent judges. The air felt heavy, electric, as if everyone knew something irreversible was about to happen. Maya walked along the rows, inspecting each soldier. No shouting, no barking orders, just that quiet, steady gaze that made even the toughest men straighten their spines. When she stopped in front of Sergeant Cole, the crowd held its breath. "Sergeant," she said evenly, "what's the first rule of leadership?" Cole swallowed. "Respect, ma'am." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "And yet last night you forgot it. Didn't you?" He nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a long moment. "You'll earn it back, not from me, but from the men you failed." She turned to the rest of the formation. "You all saw what happened. You laughed. You said nothing. That makes you complicit." The silence was suffocating. "So," she said, voice calm but cutting, You'll train until you remember what kind of soldiers you're supposed to be. What followed wasn't training. It was endurance through hell. For 12 hours, the base became a storm of movement. Obstacle runs through burning sand, weighted marches under full packs, medical drills, tactical drills, field repairs, every skill tested, every weakness exposed. And Maya didn't raise her voice once. She moved through the chaos with calm authority, correcting postures, shouting commands only when needed, pushing each man past his limit. The generals watched from the sidelines, exchanging quiet nods. They weren't here to intervene. They were here to witness. By midday, the desert heat hit triple digits. Men stumbled, gasping, some nearly collapsing. Maya didn't stop them, but she didn't leave them behind either. When a medic hesitated to help a fallen private, she knelt down herself, tying the soldier's bandage with swift precision. "You don't wait for permission to do what's right," she told him. "You just do it." The message wasn't lost on anyone. Even Cole, dripping sweat and barely standing, couldn't look away. Every command she gave was exact, every movement efficient. She wasn't punishing them out of anger. She was rebuilding them through discipline. By sundown, the yard was a field of exhausted bodies. The sky burned orange, dust hanging like smoke. Maya stood before them, hands clasped behind her back. "You want to know what separates warriors from bullies?" she said quietly. "It's not strength. It's respect. For your unit, for your mission, for the people beside you." Her gaze swept over the men. "I wasn't going to come back. I was done with command. But last night reminded me why I left, and why I can't stay silent anymore." She turned to Cole. "Step forward." He did, trembling slightly. "You've disgraced your uniform," she said. "But I don't believe in destroying soldiers. I believe in remaking them." She pointed toward the horizon. "You're assigned to the Northern Recon Route. You'll go alone, unarmed, and map the terrain for the next 24 hours. It's the same route I walked on my first mission. You'll learn what humility feels like out there." Cole hesitated. "Yes, ma'am," he said finally, voice breaking. Dismissed. As he walked away, the rest of the soldiers remained silent. No one moved until Maya said, "Fall out." The formation dispersed, but the respect was palpable now. Not forced, not ordered. Earned. General Hale stepped beside her as the men staggered off. "You handled that well, Captain. I would have court-martialed him." She gave a faint smile. "That's the difference between punishment and correction, sir. One changes behavior, the other just ends it." Hale nodded. "You always did know the line." She looked toward the horizon where Cole disappeared into the dunes. "Let's hope he learns it too." That night, as the desert cooled, the base was quiet again, but not like before. The silence carried something new. Respect. And in the command tent, the generals began discussing something none of the soldiers yet knew. "We might need her back," Hale said softly. "Project Seraph isn't finished." Long after the yard had emptied and the desert wind had swallowed the echoes of training, Captain Maya Rains sat alone in the command tent. A single lamp flickered on the table beside her. One bulb, one map, one coffee gone cold. Across from her, General Hale and General Ortiz watched in silence. Between them lay a classified dossier, its edges torn and stained with time. The cover was marked with a single word: Falcon Ridge. Maya's eyes lingered on it, unreadable. "You brought me all the way out here," she said quietly. "Just to open old wounds?" Hale exhaled, his tone softening. "You think we want to? We buried Falcon Ridge for a reason. But the base is cracking, morale is fractured, and..." He paused, meeting her eyes. "The kind of discipline you showed today, that's exactly what we need again." Maya looked away. "Falcon Ridge wasn't discipline, sir. It was survival." Ortiz leaned forward. "Then maybe survival is what we need." 3 years earlier, Falcon Ridge had been more rumor than mission. A black operation buried beneath 10 layers of clearance. No records, no medals, no graves. Just whispers. It began as a standard extraction, a downed recon team deep in enemy territory. But when Maya's transport was hit midair, She and her unit crash-landed miles from the coordinates. Half their gear burned, comms destroyed. They were cut off, no backup. No hope. And yet, Maya refused to fold. She took command before dawn, patching wounds with torn uniforms, rationing water, mapping escape routes through terrain even satellites couldn't read. For 6 days, they crawled through heat that peeled skin from bone. When one of her men collapsed from exhaustion, she carried him herself. When enemy patrols swept the canyon, she set false trails with her own boot prints. When they ran out of ammunition, she used smoke and misdirection, fighting a war of shadows. But on the 7th night, the real blow came. The ridge they'd been climbing collapsed under mortar fire. Maya was thrown off the ledge, shattered her shoulder, and was presumed dead. Her unit made the extraction alone, barely alive. The next morning, Command retrieved an encrypted signal, one no one could explain. A single message pulsing from a stolen enemy radio. Target neutralized. Operation sustained. Rains. By the time recovery teams reached the site, there were 12 enemy bodies, and one rifle, marked with her initials. They never found her. Not officially, until a week later, she walked out of the desert, dehydrated, limping, bleeding, but alive. When asked how she'd survived, she simply said, "Someone had to finish the job." Falcon Ridge became legend. A ghost story told in whispers, but for Maya it was a scar that never healed. She left the field soon after, not because she couldn't lead, but because she couldn't stand the way they'd turned her suffering into myth. Back in the tent, the generals waited for her to speak. Hale finally broke the silence. "The truth is, Captain, the only reason we didn't lose that sector is because of you. And the only reason this base hasn't fallen apart is the same." Maya shook her head. "You don't need a hero, sir. You need soldiers who remember what it means to be one." Ortiz exchanged a look with Hale. "That's exactly why we need you back." He slid a new folder across the table. The seal read, "Project Seraph, reactivation order." Maya stared at it, unmoving. "You really think I'm the answer?" Hale nodded once. "I don't think, Captain." "I know." She closed her eyes briefly, then reached for the folder. Outside, the wind howled against the tent, the same wind that had followed her since Falcon Ridge. "Then let's finish what we started," she said quietly. The next morning, the base was unrecognizable. What had once been a dusty sprawl of tents and tired faces now pulsed with movement, soldiers drilling before sunrise, engineers loading drones, and a new line of A-10s gleaming on the tarmac. The transformation was quiet but unmistakable, and at the center of it stood Captain Maya Rains, her uniform pressed, her arms still wrapped from the bruises of the brawl, and her eyes colder than the dawn itself. No one announced it officially, but word spread faster than command could contain. Project Seraph was active again. To most, it was a code name without meaning. To those who'd been there during Falcon Ridge, it was something else, a symbol of the impossible, of the woman who'd refused to die when logic said she should have. By noon, the entire airfield gathered near Hangar 7. A-10 mechanics, infantry, medics, even the cooks, all pretending to be there by coincidence. The hangar doors groaned open, revealing a jet unlike any other. Its nose art bore a single word in bold black paint, Seraph, and below it, the name, Capt. M. Rains. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. For a long moment, Maya said nothing. Then she turned to face them. Hundreds of soldiers, men and women, who had doubted her, mocked her, or simply forgotten what courage looked like. "I didn't ask for this," she began, her voice steady. "But when the sky falls, you don't get to choose whether you stand. You either rise, or everyone behind you burns." Her gaze swept across the hangar, sharp as shrapnel. "You've all heard stories," she continued, "about Falcon Ridge, about what I did or didn't do. Let me make this clear. There was no miracle. Just blood, dirt, and decisions no one wanted to make. I survived because others didn't, and I'll never forget that." The silence was thick enough to hear the hum of engines outside. "But I'll tell you this," she said, stepping closer, her boots echoing. If you think the war's over, you're wrong. The mission is never over until every one of us comes home. When she finished, no one cheered. No one clapped. But as she turned back toward the A-10, something shifted. A quiet, collective resolve. For the first time in months, the base remembered what unity sounded like. Hours later, as the sun dropped below the horizon, the airfield glowed in shades of amber and smoke. Maya climbed into the cockpit of the Seraph, her fingers tracing the metal as if greeting an old friend. Ground control crackled in her headset. Seraph 1, you are cleared for test flight. Welcome back, ma'am, she smiled faintly. Let's see if I still remember how to fly. The twin engines roared to life, rattling the sand beneath the hangar. Soldiers looked up as the Warthog taxied to the runway. A machine reborn, guided by a legend they'd once underestimated. When she hit the throttle, the A-10 screamed down the strip, its engines howling like vengeance. And as the jet lifted into the dying light, a hush fell over the base. For those watching from below, it wasn't just a flight. It was a return, the rebirth of something the war had nearly buried. Faith. That night, as the stars bled through the clouds, the generals stood together outside command. Ortiz broke the silence first. She's different now, Hale nodded slowly. No, she's the same. That's what scares them. Above them, a faint sonic boom rolled across the desert, the voice of the Seraph cutting through the night. And somewhere out there, Captain Maya Raines smiled into the darkness, her voice low through the comms. This time, nobody gets left behind. The alarm came just after midnight. At first, it was a single red light blinking in the command tent. Then came the klaxon, long, rising, and unmistakable. Within seconds, every man and woman on base was awake, boots pounding the sand. The comms erupted in static and overlapping voices. Incoming drones, bearing 210 degrees. They're targeting the fuel line. Where's air cover? We need immediate scramble. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The radar screen bloomed with red. Not 5, not 10, but 50 enemy drones, swarming in from the south like hornets. Major Hale burst into command, half-dressed, eyes blazing. Who's up? Air wings grounded, sir. Storms over the ridge, a tech shouted. Winds are tearing through the lower airspace. Before the officer could finish, another voice cut through the noise. Calm, controlled, female. Seraph 1 is prepped and ready. Everyone froze. Captain Maya Raines was already walking across the flight line, helmet under her arm, wind whipping her hair. Lightning split the horizon, the kind that turned sand into glass. Her A-10 waited, engines humming low, lights blinking like eyes in the storm. Raines, it's suicide out there. Hale barked over the radio. Those winds will tear you apart before you even hit altitude. She smiled faintly, fastening her helmet. Then I won't climb. I'll hunt them from below. The storm hit the moment she took off. Rain slammed against the canopy like bullets. Crosswinds yanked at the wings, tossing the A-10 sideways. But Maya held steady, her fingers dancing over the controls, guiding the Seraph through chaos like it was alive. The enemy drones appeared as flickering lights in the distance, weaving through the storm, small but deadly. They carried smart ordnance, each capable of leveling a hangar. Seraph 1 to command, she said. Targets locked, engaging. The GAU-8 cannon thundered. A roar so deep it shook the clouds. Tracer fire carved molten lines through the night, and one by one, the drones began to explode, white flashes across the desert. But for every one that fell, 2 more appeared. 35 left, the radar officer called. They're adjusting formation. Let them, Maya muttered. They want a storm. I'll give them one. She dropped altitude, flying just 50 feet above the ground, so low her jet's shadow merged with the dunes. Lightning flashed again, revealing the A-10's shape. Dark, predatory, relentless. The drones dove after her, guided by AI. That's when she did something that made no tactical sense at all. She cut the throttle. The A-10 dipped, almost stalling, and the pursuing swarm overshot. A perfect target. Maya flipped the jet in a violent half-roll and fired. The desert sky exploded, 8 drones down in a single burst. The shockwave rippled through the sand, lighting up the night like sunrise. Holy hell, someone whispered in command. But it wasn't over. A larger blip appeared on radar. Heavier, faster, carrying a payload too big to be anything but catastrophic. The enemy's command drone. "Rains," Hale warned. "If that thing reaches the base, it's over." "Not while I'm breathing," she replied. She banked hard, engines howling. Her oxygen read low. The storm was tearing apart the sky. But as she closed in, the comms picked up something chilling. The enemy's open channel. Neutralize the Seraph. Prioritize the pilot. Repeat. Neutralize Rains. They knew her name. For a heartbeat, everything went quiet. The storm, the static, even the fear. Then Maya's voice cut through, cold and clear. "This is Seraph 1. You should have stayed quiet." She dove straight into the heart of the storm. The last thing anyone on base saw was a flash, blinding, white, and endless. Then the sky caught fire. The blast shook the desert for miles. For a long, unbearable moment, no one in command spoke. The radar screen went blank, a single white bloom expanding outward until every signal vanished. The communications board hissed with static, drowning out the frantic calls from ground patrols. Then, silence. Only the wind. Major Hale stared at the empty radar, his throat dry. "Do we have visual?" "Negative," said the tech. "We lost Seraph 1's transponder at E103 hours. Last altitude, 32 feet. After that..." He didn't finish. Across the base, soldiers poured onto the tarmac, scanning the burning horizon. The southern ridge glowed faintly, a jagged orange smear against the storm-dark sky. For hours, rescue teams fought their way through wreckage and fire. But by dawn, they found nothing. No jet, no pilot, no trace of Captain Maya Rains. The base buried her without a body 3 days later. The ceremony was brief. A folded flag, a few words from Hale, and 3 silent generals standing at the back. No one spoke of the drone strike or the firestorm that followed. Official reports called it equipment failure during combat engagement. But among the soldiers, a different story spread. They said she'd taken the command drone head-on, ramming it mid-descent. They said the explosion had vaporized both aircraft, but the shockwave had knocked out every remaining drone, saving the base. And when they played back the last recording from the comms tower, her final words echoed through the speakers. "If the sky burns, let it be on my terms." Weeks passed. The base rebuilt. New pilots came, new missions launched. But something lingered. An invisible mark left by the woman who had refused to die quietly. One evening, during a sandstorm briefing, a corporal ran into the command tent, breathless. "Sir, you need to see this." He handed Hale a radio headset, one of the emergency frequencies left open since the night of the attack. The channel was filled with static, nothing unusual, until a faint rhythmic sound cut through, a coded pulse. Short, long. Then again, and again, the sergeant frowned. "It's repeating every 20 seconds. Looks like..." Hale's face went pale. "That's her flight signature." Everyone froze. The signal wasn't coming from the ridge. It was coming beyond it, deep inside the no-fly zone, near the canyon where her first rescue had made history. "Could be interference," someone muttered. "Could be her," Hale said quietly. He stared out toward the storm, the desert stretching endlessly into darkness. The Seraph was built to survive what no one else could. Maybe its pilot was too. Days later, satellite imagery arrived from recon. Buried in the dunes, the faint outline of metal wings, but beside it, a heat signature. Moving. Alive. The file was marked classified, level red. And on the last page of the transmission, scrawled in pen by an unknown hand, were 5 words. "She's still protecting the skies." That night, as another storm rolled over the horizon, the soldiers at Falcon Ridge looked up instinctively. Lightning tore across the sky, and for a split second they saw it. A silhouette slicing through the clouds, not a drone, not a trick of light. A warthog. Low, steady, defiant. And though no one said a word, every man and woman who saw it felt the same thing. the same quiet pulse that carried through the wind. Seraph 1, still on station. 6 months after the night the sky caught fire, the war changed shape. Enemy forces had regrouped across the northern border, faster, smarter, and angrier. Every outpost near Falcon Ridge was on edge, bracing for an assault no one believed they could withstand twice. The base ran skeleton crews, fuel was rationed, and morale bled slow. By then, the name Maya Raines had become something between a prayer and a myth. Recruits whispered it like legend. Veterans refused to say it aloud, afraid that speaking it might prove she was really gone. Then came the night the sky broke open again. At 0200 hours, the radar screens lit up. 30 enemy aircraft. High altitude, moving fast. Multiple contacts inbound, shouted the operator. All heading for Falcon Ridge. Hale rushed to command, heart pounding. Where's our air wing? Grounded, the officer said grimly. We've got no one up there, sir. Storm cells are... But before he could finish, every monitor in the room flickered. Static washed across the displays, and through the distortion came a familiar, clipped voice. Calm as ever. This is Seraph 1. I'm already in the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Impossible. She's gone. Track that signal. The tech's fingers flew over the console. Sir, she's flying at 2,000 feet. Transponder code matches the original Seraph. Hale's breath caught. Patch her through. The line cleared with a pop of static. Falcon Ridge Command, this is Captain Raines. You're about to have company. Let's not make them comfortable. Outside, the desert sky glowed red with enemy flares. Lightning licked the horizon. The first wave of hostile aircraft broke formation, descending toward the base like vultures. Then, a sound no one had heard since that night. A thunderous growl rolling through the clouds. The Seraph burst from the storm front, cannons blazing. Her first shot tore through an enemy gunship, shredding it mid-turn. The second silenced another before its radar could lock. Soldiers on the ground watched in stunned disbelief as the A-10 danced between lightning bolts, wings glinting in flashes of white fire. You seeing this? A young Marine whispered. Yeah, his sergeant said softly. And I don't believe a damn second of it. Back in command, Hale gripped the edge of the console. Raines, report status. Status? Her voice crackled through the storm. Let's call it airborne resurrection. She dove again, taking 3 fighters in a single run. The radar screamed with enemy chatter. Frantic, disorganized. Target the Warthog. Negative. She's behind us. Each transmission ended in static. Within minutes, the sky was clear except for smoke and drifting wreckage. The last hostile aircraft tried to flee north, but the Seraph was faster. Her final salvo hit it dead center, and the explosion painted the clouds in gold. When the silence finally settled, Command was still staring at the radar. One blip remained. Steady, pulsing. Seraph 1 to Command, Maya said. Area secure. Recommend no one call me a myth again. Hale pressed a hand to his headset, voice breaking slightly. Copy that, Seraph 1. Welcome home. Home, she repeated softly. Never left. Then the line went quiet. Outside, soldiers lined the runway, scanning the sky for her landing lights. But the night stayed empty, only thunder and rain, and as dawn broke, someone noticed fresh tracks on the sand, leading from the ridge. Small, steady footprints heading back toward the airfield. No jet, no wreckage, just proof she'd been there. By noon, Command issued a single-line report. Unidentified A-10 engaged and neutralized enemy strike. Pilot unconfirmed. But for the men and women of Falcon Ridge, that wasn't the truth. Because later that day, etched into the hangar wall, someone found 6 words scratched into the metal with a combat knife. Still flying. Still watching. Seraph. By the time the official reports reached Washington, the story was already out of control. Satellite footage from the night of the attack had gone viral across every secure channel. Grainy infrared images showed a single A-10 carving through a storm, moving like nothing human could have controlled. The brass tried to suppress it, classified it under atmospheric anomaly footage. But it was too late. Soldiers from 3 different bases had witnessed it. Marines from the Northern Front swore they'd heard her call sign echo through their comms, even hundreds of miles away. Someone leaked the radar logs, and every forum from pilot boards to conspiracy sites started using the same word. Seraph, the angel of the storm, the ghost who never stopped fighting. At Falcon Ridge, her old tent stood untouched. The medics had folded her uniform, her helmet, her sidearm, all sealed in a glass case beside the mess hall. New recruits would stop by after training, stare at the display, and whisper stories they'd heard from veterans. One said she'd been part of a classified test program, that the A-10 she flew wasn't standard issue, but a prototype built for impossible missions. Another swore she'd been seen months later, landing on a carrier off the coast of Greece, alone. No insignia, no ID. Others believed she'd died that night, and what they saw was something else entirely. But for the ones who had fought under her, the SEALs she'd saved, the medics she'd defended, the generals she'd defied, it didn't matter which version was true. Because every time a storm rolled over the desert, and thunder shook the walls of Falcon Ridge, they looked up, and for a heartbeat, they believed. Major Hale retired 2 years later. On his last day, he visited the hangar alone. Dust covered the floor, sunlight cutting through the roof panels like broken glass. He ran a hand over the nose of an old A-10, the same one that had once borne the name Seraph. The paint was faded now, the word barely visible. In the quiet, he said, "You proved them all wrong, kid." He turned to leave, but a sound stopped him. 3 soft clicks from the far end of the hangar. The unmistakable rhythm of a flight code, short, long. He froze. "Maya?" The lights flickered. The sound came again, faint, distant like a heartbeat across static. Short, long. He smiled, eyes wet. "Still watching, huh?" Then he saluted, hand trembling slightly, and whispered the only words that mattered. "Welcome home, Seraph." Months later, during a new deployment briefing, a young pilot raised her hand. "Sir, permission to ask?" The general nodded. "Is it true what they say? That Seraph still flies?" The room fell silent. Then the general, Hale's replacement, looked out the window at the storm gathering on the horizon. He smiled faintly. "Depends on what you believe. But I'll tell you this. Every time our boys are outnumbered, every time the clouds open up and something clears the sky, we find 30mm casings in the sand, unmarked, still warm." The room went dead quiet. "Now," he said, straightening, "let's go make her proud." That night, thunder rolled again, somewhere beyond the dunes. Lightning split the sky, and for just a second, between the cracks of light and the roar of the storm, a dark shape moved across the clouds, low, steady, relentless. The soldiers on watch duty looked up and whispered the same word, barely audible against the wind. Seraph. 10 years later, the war was long over. Falcon Ridge had been decommissioned, its runways cracked, its towers stripped bare. Sand swallowed the once bustling outpost, leaving only silence and ghosts. But one evening, as the sun bled into the dunes, a convoy approached the base. At its head, a single black jeep stopped beside the rusted hangar that had once housed Seraph 1. A young pilot stepped out. Captain Ilara Voss, newest ace of the Air Corps, freshly decorated, curious about the stories that had shaped her generation. She'd grown up hearing them, about the A-10 that returned from the dead, about the angel who flew through fire. Her orders were simple. Recover whatever flight data still remained in the old hangar's archive before the site was buried for good. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. Faded sunlight caught the remains of a control panel, cracked under years of heat. Ilara brushed aside the sand and froze. On the console, a symbol carved roughly into the metal with a knife. She smiled faintly. Seraph 1. Then behind the console she saw it, a sealed locker. Rusted but intact. She pried it open. Inside lay a flight helmet, visor cracked, paint scorched. Across the rim, barely visible under the soot, was a single name. Her breath caught. Beneath it was a small data drive, marked Restricted. Black Sky Ops. Alara plugged it into her portable terminal. The screen flickered, then lit with a familiar voice, clear, steady, calm. Flight log, Captain Maya Rains, final entry. The voice echoed through the hangar, recorded years ago but still carrying that same quiet strength. If you're hearing this, you've found what's left of me. Or maybe not. Doesn't matter. I never cared about medals or myths. I cared about the ones who thought they didn't matter. The rookies, the medics. The ones everyone called liabilities. I was one of them once. Alara stood still, every word cutting through the silence. War takes everything from you, but sometimes if you fight hard enough, it gives something back. A reason. Mine was to make sure no one else got left behind. There was a pause, faint static, then a soft laugh. They'll tell stories. Let them. But if anyone asks what Seraph really was, tell them she was just a pilot who refused to quit. And if you're hearing this out there, somewhere in the sky, then it's your turn to fly. The message ended. For a moment, only the desert wind filled the hangar. Alara exhaled slowly, closing the terminal. Then she noticed something else. Etched into the inside of the locker door, almost invisible under a layer of dust. 5 words, carved deep and deliberate. Still flying. Still watching. MR, she stood there for a long time. The last light of the setting sun spilling across the floor, until it hit something buried beneath the sand near the back wall. She brushed it away, and froze. Metal. Wing plating. Marked with the faded serial, Seraph 01, but it wasn't wreckage. The metal was smooth, seamless, as if it had landed there gently and been left untouched. And beside it, in the dust, a single fresh footprint, boot tread. New Alara looked toward the horizon, where the desert met the blood-red sky. And for a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement, a dark silhouette cutting through the clouds. Low, steady, familiar. Her radio crackled to life just once, short, long, then silence. Alara smiled, saluted the sky and whispered the legend's name. Seraph 1, still on station.